Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the Fashion Network in association with our partners at Increff. The topic of today is Buying and Merchandising Strategies 2023, Trading in Uncertain Times. Now, this open discussion with our three industry experts will look at how buyers and merchandisers can adapt, prepare and strategize for what may be a bumpy, if not at least interesting year ahead. We will also be looking at how you can improve efficiencies, you can improve better working practices, and ultimately a better sell-through rate on your inventory. Just a few things to note at the beginning though, is if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat box and then we will do our best to respond to as many as possible. We do want to keep this discussion as interactive as possible, so please do get involved. Alternatively, if you prefer to speak rather than type, then you can click on a little raise your hand feature. It should be on your toolbox somewhere. And that will allow us then to switch your audio feed on and you'll be able to speak to us directly. Just a thing to note though is that we do record these sessions, so if you do use that feature, then your voice might appear on our YouTube channel at a later date. Now, speaking about our YouTube channel, if you do want to catch up on this, or you perhaps want to share this with your colleague or perhaps your line manager, then we will be sending an email around to everybody that's registered to this webinar, and there'll be a link in that email that will send you directly to the recording. Finally, immediately after this webinar, we'll be holding like a little bit of a debrief stroke virtual networking session. So if you would like to come and join us and our panelists, then you're more than welcome to do that. There will be a link that will be posted in the chat box towards the end of the seminar. So that's will be happening immediately after this. If there's enough of us, we might just break off into little rooms. If not, we'll probably just have an open forum. So the next thing I would like you to do, I'm going to ask everybody in the audience here. Now, if my colleague Mia can just double check that the chat box is open, I'm going to ask you to basically pop in the chat box where you're from in the world and what it is that you do. So just let us know in the chat box where you're from in the world and what it is that you do. And that will allow our panelists to have an idea of what it is or who it is we're speaking to. We don't really monitor the Q&A section on the bottom, so we'd rather you just put everything in the chat box. There we go. Thanks, Christian. You're our first one there. Brilliant. So yeah, just let us know where you're from in the world and what it is that you do. And then we'll have a quick nosy at that in a minute. But next, I'd just like to thank today's sponsor. So today's sponsor is Increff. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a brief down. So huge thank you for you guys for sponsoring this session. Now, the reason that Increff are getting behind this particular topic is because they are a software business that helps brands and retailers to better optimize their inventory management. A merchandiser's best friend, the Increff solution can help you allocate better and help to fulfill orders across all sales channels through one common omni-channel platform. Now, this works for both B2B and D2C businesses, but what this means for retailers is that you can expect a better sell-through rate, more efficient allocation of product, and less excess inventory at the end of the season. So if you feel you could benefit from such a solution, or perhaps you would just like to learn more, then drop us a note here at the Fashion Network, and myself and my colleague would be more than happy to introduce any of you to the relevant Increff team member. So that's a little bit about the sponsor. A little bit about myself. So my name is Dale Hicks. I am one of the co-founders here at the Fashion Network, and I will be chairing today's session. Joining me is Iona Lewis, who's a senior buyer at Matalan. Now, Iona has over 16 years experience in buying at the highest level, including with such brands as TJ Hughes, Express Gifts, and now at Matalan, where she holds a full-time post. Now, Iona, outside of work, she's been converting a squash court, I do believe, into a home for the past few years. So it seems like you're a very busy woman, Iona.
Yes.
Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, how you look at it, we were due to have Anshuman, who was one of the co-founders at Increff, but unfortunately he's stuck, I believe, in trying to get his German visa. He's traveling on business, but we've got two of his colleagues who will be joining us instead. We have Kanika, Bhalla, who's chief of Curiosity. It says founder, traveler, speaker, minimalist, and startup advisor on your LinkedIn profile, Kanika. Alongside that, we have Vaibhav Shukla, who is also a senior principal at Increff. So we should have a pretty good panel here for you guys to get some interesting insights. Before we begin, I'm just going to bring down the slides, and my colleague is just about going to publish a poll. So we're going to be shortly asking you guys a question, which is, what are your key pain points in managing your stock inventory? So there's the poll, guys. So if you could just fill that out. So let us know, what are your key pain points in managing your stock inventory? While that's doing, I'm just going to have a quick nosy in the chat box and just say we've got people from all over the world here. So Christian, you were the first to say, and you're in from Indonesia. We've got someone in here from London, Jessica, who's a merchandiser. Rimple, London, another merchandiser. So we've got quite a lot of merchandisers in here. We've got somebody from another merchandiser from Amsterdam. Hi, Meg. Hi, Brian from Ireland. Byron, a buyer from here in the UK in the Midlands. We've got a buyer here, Camila from Lebanon. Sublas from India as a consultant. Got a buyer from Brazil, London, Milan, Amsterdam. So we've got quite a wide range of audience here from all over the world, but mainly they seem to be buyers, a few marketing guys. Hi, Laura, senior science in sport merch manager. Interesting. How are we doing with the poll, Mia? Are we near to publishing that just yet? So here we go. So we have that out of our poll, we have poor planning, I think, is just coming out ahead as poor planning leading to stockouts or unsold inventory being the biggest pain point, shortly following poor buying decisions leading to unsold stock. So I'm just going to come to one of you guys. Can I come to you, Kanika, first? Does that come of any surprise to you from an Increff perspective? And then I'll come to you after that, Vaibhav.
Thanks for having me, first of all, Dale. Honestly, no. In fact, these are the common problems that everybody across the merchant network, the buyer network faces. It's pretty common to see these kind of issues happening across retail. And in my past life, I had been a retailer myself, and I've seen this same happening everywhere, because people, unfortunately, are not really equipped with the right data or the right tools to be able to solve these issues at their end to begin with. So to answer your question, no surprise there, honestly.
Vaibhav, what about yourself? Does it come as a surprise, or was that?
No, totally agree. I think this is one of the main challenges all the buyers and merchandisers are facing today, especially in fashion, because it has a limited life cycle. There are trends you need to catch up on, make new stuff. So it is becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
And would you concur, Iona, or?
Yeah, I think it has been because of what's happened over the past few years that it's been really difficult to plan. So, you think the market's going to come back, it doesn't quite. So you're left with stock because, people aren't buying like you expect them to. So it's been really difficult, I think, to do that planning side of it. I was interested actually that buying decisions is quite closely behind that. Poor buying decisions. I'd be interested to get more detail on what that meant, but I can see how poor planning over the past few years has been the biggest impact, definitely.
Yeah, I did look at you and that. Sorry, I did look up to your camera when I saw that.
There's no one from Matalan on this panel, so that's
no. There's definitely no one from Matalan in the audience that I can see either. So if anyone in the audience does want to tick that option in the poll and want to elaborate that, then feel free just to pop that in the chat box if you don't mind. I'm going to come back to you, Iona, with my first question. So we're basically going to run through a load of the discussion points that was on the Eventbrite page promoting this session. And my first question really is, how has the role of buying and merchandisers changed over the last few years? I know it's been quite an interesting time for almost 4 years now since, the pandemic and that. Can you just give us some thoughts on that, how buying and merchandising has changed?
Yeah, I think it's changed hugely over the past few years. for some for the good, some negative, and I think some things have been permanent changes and some things we can get back. I mean, predominantly as a buyer, I mean, I love the job of buying. I started as a teacher and I got into buying, and I'm really passionate about it. And I think what I love about it most is the product focus side of it. And I think that's what we've inherently lost over the past few years, because we haven't managed to go out to the supply side to really look and get to grips with the detail of the product, the feel of the product. And we've kind of been, stepped back from that. Really, we've been forced to step back from it, and that really is why I love my job more than anything, is that product, the sort of passion for the product. And it's been difficult to do that remotely, on a screen, on a Zoom call, on a Teams call. Is really hard then to kind of get that passion and put that level of detail into the product. So I think that's been the biggest impact for me. The other thing that I think is so important in the job that we've lost a little bit is that communication and that contact. And while we found different ways to communicate and contact, so the Zoom meeting, the Teams meetings, which means we probably contact abroad more often than we would have prior to the pandemic, which is a positive. But on the negative side, we don't get out to the suppliers as much as we should. Trade shows have been slow to come back. Those are important. And I think, so there's the product side for me, and the other key bit for me is that communication piece, where we're building relationships with our suppliers, and that all helps to get the best out of, and we're talking about poor planning and buying decisions, but, inherently, I think building those relationships up with supply base is a really key part of getting that, that right. So I think those are probably the biggest ones for me. I feel like it's moved to a very kind of spreadsheet, computer-based job, which is not the job I fell in love with, which was being involved in product, being involved with people, and that side of it. And I think that probably does impact a lot on the customer experience and what they see now in stores, and will, from a stock perspective, have big impact. Because if we as buyers aren't touching, feeling, experiencing the product, then the customer experience at the other end is going to be really impacted in that. And I think that's really one of the biggest impacts that's happened over the past few years.
Vaibhav, you're nodding away there profusely. Can I bring you in on this point as well? Would you like to add to what she was just saying then? And maybe talk a little bit about how merchandising's changed as well?
Sure, Dale. So I completely agree with Iona here. So the roles have changed. It has been moving more towards, say, data-driven decision-making, working on those spreadsheets, those tools now. And it has come out of, say, more of a gut-based decision-making process to more of a data-driven decision-making process. And there are the technology is also supporting all the buying and merchandising people out there right now to help them scale this way. Also coming out of more of operational things, our day-to-day operations thing, and moving more towards strategic decision-making, more towards high-level growth orientation is something what we have realized, that the same level of buyers, same level of merchandisers, which earlier were focusing more on operations, are now looking more at the bigger picture and how to use data to capitalize on.
Yeah, and I agree actually in terms of that data piece, because I love data actually. I really like the kind of mathematical data side of it, but it does have to be that marriage of the two. You have to understand your range, what your customer's telling you, where your stock is, etc. So you have to understand that, but it's that marriage of that with that kind of product side of it, and that understanding, I think, and like I was saying, talking to the suppliers and understanding what's happening at the front end as well, to build up that picture to be more successful, I think.
It's funny because we've got a comment here from Jeff in the chat box saying that retail has always been a mix of art and science, and we need that balance to best serve the customer, which sort of backs up your point in some respects. Kanika, I'm going to bring you in if that's okay. Can you just give us some thoughts about what should buyers and merchandisers be preparing for in 2023 and beyond, for that matter? Do you want to just give us some thoughts about what, how would
Sure,
you see
Dale.
it?
Absolutely. In fact, building on what Iona said earlier, I think it's absolutely right when she said that buying used to be more of an exciting job, and you used to actually touch and feel the product. You used to be interacting with a lot more on the supplier side, and now that's kind of reduced a lot because a lot of buyers and merchants are spending a lot of time just number crunching, doing a lot of spreadsheet kind of a work, and that's not helping anybody's case. In fact, Jeff put it aptly. What buyers used to love about the job largely was the art side of it, actually interacting with the product, the figuring out what is it that's going to be selling this season, what is it that I should be putting out in my stores. Now it's more become like, do I need to have X number of pieces of blah, 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 and so store without actually even having to feel the store, feel the product, like you said, Iona. So that's definitely a big change that has already happened. Coming to the trends for 2023, what it's going to look like ideally. I think what's happening is a lot of people these days are spending a lot of time doing things that they would rather outsource, and they would rather have somebody else take care of, and would focus more on what is actually impacting their businesses. Like eventually a customer is coming to your store to buy your product, and buyers and merchandisers across the retail world would ideally want to focus more on the product and not so much on how much and when and where, and coordinating with everything and making sure that everything is available at the right place at the right time, going through the works of spreadsheets and all. So that's something that's definitely going to change this year, is what I feel, simply because people are coming out of the pandemic now. More and more people are going to the physical stores again. The online shopping has, again, more or less settled down at a certain level. People have started making their choices of whether they want to buy online or offline. So it's going to be more like an approach wherein people are going to settle in a rhythm of a certain buying pattern. And when that happens, it's going to be even more important for merchandisers and buyers to make sure that they have the right products available. And that's what the customers are looking for. And if they don't really have the right products available at the right place at the right time, eventually they're going to miss out on the sale of the products to the customers. In fact, that's what customers are also looking for. Take an example of stockouts, right? It's a very common problem. You go into a store, you're looking for a certain size of product that you want to buy, and you're not able to find it. And then what happens? You tend to miss out. You just say that, okay, maybe I'm not going to get it this time. Maybe I'm going to come back or look for another same product in another store and all that. But that's not always the case. So the biggest challenge that the buyers and merchandisers that are going to face this year is going to be, how do we marry the two? How do we figure out that we have the right product in the stores, which is the product like Iona mentioned, the physical product, that's the right product that the people are looking for, and at the right place, without having to worry about how do I coordinate with my suppliers? How do I make sure that my merchandising reaching where it is supposed to be reaching? I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're still going to have another year of inconsistency. I think it'll settle more than it has the past few years, but I think it's going to be key to get it right. I mean, Forbes are saying that spending will increase this year, so that we will still see people spending, but what they're going to do is be more careful about where they spend their money. I know the customers are always looking for value, and I think what's really important is to distinguish between price point and value. And the customers will spend the money if they think they're getting good value, or they love the product and they're buying things that they really want. So they've got the money to spend, but they're only spending it on things they really want. And I think that is where it's key getting the product right, because we saw, say, pre-Christmas in terms of sales, there were products that were more expensive than we would have sold before, and you start to feel nervous. Customers don't have the money. There's a cost of living crisis. Are they going to buy it? But they're buying it because it's good value. So where it's £90 somewhere else, if we're selling it for 60 and the quality is just as good, they will buy it because they see the value in it. And I think that's really important that we remember. And I think the other thing that's important is complacency. We get really complacent, particularly about bestsellers. And I mean, there's some things that don't need moving on. White plate is a white plate, but I've seen it before on products where you say, oh, it's one of our core products, our key items. And if it's not something as basic as a white plate, let's say it's a coloured plate that we're selling for £1. That was the good old days. But, you know, you see it's your biggest cash, but your cash declines. So you think, I can't do anything with it. It's my biggest cash. I'm too scared to touch it. You've got to be a little bit bullish in this job, I think, without being reckless. And it's really important that I think we don't get complacent as buyers and think that, you know, we're nervous because we don't know what's happening with the market, and it stops us making key decisions that we need to make. Because, you know, I think probably people are a bit more nervous about decisions these days because really, who knows what's going to happen? You make a decision and then something changes a few weeks later. So, but I think it's really important that we keep that kind of mentality.
Are you sort of saying, both of you sort of saying, take a chance a little bit this year, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to take an informed chance. You've got to look at your data as well, and you've got to look at the market, and you've got to speak to your suppliers, and you've got to understand your customer. So you've got to have all those things in order to make those decisions. So when I say be bullish, I don't mean be frivolous or, you know, or gung-ho.
Reckless.
Yeah, reckless, yeah. But you have to be, I mean, listen, I'm a seasonal buyer, so I have to be a little bit bullish because I've only got one bite of the cherry, really. But I do think that, you know, people, you have to not be scared and not be afraid to make decisions where, you know, if you're seeing you know, if you're seeing that sort of decline in sales and you think, oh, I can't get hold of it because I don't want, it's still my biggest cash. It won't carry on being your biggest cash if you watch it decline. And that's where I think people can become complacent and scared, particularly at the moment.
That's very interesting that you brought that up, Iona. So in fact, what we see is traditionally people have been looking at bestsellers and core items as the same. They tend to carry them season on season, and they say that, okay, this has been selling well for me for the last 5 seasons. I'm going to continue carrying it. However, like you said, probably that's not how it should be. People should be figuring out, okay, my bestsellers could have changed this season. People could be looking at different kind of products this season, whereas my core items, again, may not be the same every time. Well, of course, I want to carry them for XYZ reasons because that probably brings in the whole brand element. I want to showcase certain kind of products in the stores at all points in time. Like you said, I think it makes sense to just be able to make quick decisions on our feet and say that, what if my bestsellers have changed this season? And what if I want to change I want to change something while I'm in season? I don't really want to have to stick with the decision that I made 6 months back, or like you said, while you only get one buy. But at the same time, you can probably make those decisions quicker and say that, what if I want to make the change in the mix while I'm in season? So absolutely with you on that, on making quicker decisions and not being scared of, oh my God, this is always how things have happened, and maybe I should stick to those kind of things now.
It's too much agreeing going on there. I was hoping for a bit of a debate, but
Always up for debates.
it was up for debate. I was just going to mention for obviously our panelists and the audience, there is some interesting comments coming into the chat box, so keep an eye on that because there's some interesting comments that some of you are leaving. And if you are leaving a comment, make sure you leave it so that everybody can see, because like I say, it's can be quite a good learning experience just reading what other people's thoughts are at these sessions. I'd like to move on to my next point now and talk a little bit about inventory here, and I want to talk about how to bring down inventory without sort of like affecting your overall margins. And if it's okay, Vaibhav, I'd like to come to you on that. Do you want to talk us a little bit about, I mean, obviously every retailer's dream is to have a full-on sell-through and, you know, keep the inventory as small as possible, but do you want to share your thoughts on how to keep inventory down without affecting margins?
Yeah, so I think this is the core KRA of any buyer to bring in or maintain the margins while keeping the optimum stock or optimum inventory. So the best way to do that is buying the right inventory in the right quantity, like betting right. So you need not, haggle on reducing your COGS, your cost of production, etc. If you crack the supply chain right, if you are able to do the planning right, if you are able to incorporate the learnings from the past and then incorporating all those learnings in the right set of inventory, then you need not use the COGS lever to capitalize on the margins only. You can just use the supply chain and the proper planning process to make the entire business better. So Say one of the better ways to do it, I would say, is just an example is say not going for a full season buy entirely. So a lot of brands still do it. It has been a traditional way that people generally go for the entire spring summer buy or entire autumn winter buy. So firstly, understanding from the past that historically where you have overbought, where you have made those mistakes, uh, invested in some inventory which has not sold, and cutting down on those bets. And then secondly, breaking down your supply chain into bits, into different drops, bite-sized drops, so that overall the working capital is also more fluid for you. So the buyer has like the major role to play over here. It's completely his or her care.
So what you're saying is, if you can do better analysis, do a lot more studying of what's sold, what's not sold, you don't have to basically break the back of your suppliers as much. Effectively, that's what you're saying, pretty much. Would that be right?
It's a mix of both. Yeah. So breaking down your wrong bets or reducing whatever you have overbought in the past and correcting those mistakes, and also making sure that in future whatever you're placing is planned in a way where you can rotate inventory faster, keep just the right amount of inventory at the right places, and churn out the same revenue or more.
Okay. Kanika, I want to talk to you a little bit about markdown optimizations. Now, obviously, is this an art? Is this a science? I mean, it seems to be something, when we publish a lot of stuff around like pricing strategies and stuff, it seems to be the bane of a lot of people's backs. But do you want to share some insights on that, on markdown optimization, if you can?
Absolutely, Dale. But before I get into it, just to Vaibhav's point, like you said, while betting right may sound like an oxymoron, how do you bet right exactly? But get his point. So what's really happening on the buy side, like he said, is if you're buying right and you're placing your inventory at the right place at the right time, you're more likely to have a higher sell-throughs. That's exactly where the markdown optimization also comes in. If you don't really have to mark down your inventory like every buyer's dream, right? I mean, let's say I'm actually able to sell everything that I ever bought at full price in the season without really having to carry any inventory over to the next season. That's going to be everybody's dream. Having said that, it's not that hard. Sometimes what happens is in our pricing strategies, we tend to price our products a little too aggressively, and then they are not selling for XYZ reason. But more often than not, the pricing or the discounting or markdown issues is largely because you have leftover inventory and you haven't been able to sell them through as per your plan. And that's exactly why you have to mark down. However, if you were able to actually buy at store level, let's say we all have revenue targets, we all have ODB plans, we all have a high level look at what is it that we're looking to do this season. Most of us tend to not do it at a store level, at a channel level. Most of us tend to still focus on a very, very high level picture and then break it down into what is it that I want in terms of a category, what is it that I want in terms of a specific product style, etc. But then what if you were able to do that at a store level to begin with, when you bought right, then of course the requirement for markdown itself is going to go down. That's one. Second, even if we do have to mark down, I would suggest that markdowns is something that should be more dynamic than it is right now. What most of us tend to do is we tend to have the same markdown over the same products across channels, across stores, and for a longer period of time without really actually having to analyze that whether they're actually working with the current markdowns or not. What that really means is, what if you were able to see that you have only 2 pieces of a certain product lying in a certain store, and you do not need to mark down that product anymore to be able to sell that because you don't really have that inventory lying in the stores anymore. So you should be able to make that decision on the go and really quickly, because that's going to maximize the money left on the table for the retailer. Eventually, nobody wants to mark down more than it's necessary. So did that answer your question, Dale?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I'll come to Vaibhav quickly, but can I just come to you, Iona? Do you do store level buys with you guys? I mean, if I don't want you to get into giving your trade secrets away, so I'm asking you.
We do grade stores, so we'll grade stores, and I think part of, for me, in terms of that markdown piece, I think the relationship between the buyer and merchandiser, and I know some retailers, the buyer is the merchandiser, etc. So it's one role, but I'm used to mostly working as a buyer alongside a merchandiser, and I think that relationship is key. So I will spend time with my merchandiser looking at the range, at the physical products, talking about what we believe in, looking at the history. And I think that kind of relationship is really important to get the buys right, because I've seen it before where the merchandiser goes off and places what they think against the product. But if it's not in tandem with the buyer and that sort of level of discussion, then I think that is a recipe for markdown, definitely. I think the other thing that's key is the relationship between buyer and supplier. So having a strong, I mean, where I would be I know there are some retailers that are quite happy to move from a margin perspective from supplier to get the margin. Now that's great, you get a margin up front, but I do think that that's where a lot of retailers come unstuck in terms of markdown, because they're chasing upfront margin, which doesn't always translate into sales. So I think that the supplier buyer relationship is really important. And, you know, I would rather build up a relationship with my supplier. And I just think sometimes you can quite often you just get the best out of them. So, I mean, I buy luggage, and that's been an absolute nightmare for the past few years in terms of moving stock. You know, we want it, we don't want it, the market's going to open up, oh no one's traveling again, you know, oh no one's got any money, actually yeah, everybody wants to go on holiday, you know, it's really hard to manage. So I think that, you know, we've managed it quite well because we've had that relationship with the supplier, and we haven't spread our business everywhere, you know, across multiple people. And I think that's really important. And also, if you have that relationship with the supplier, that would enable you to manage your inventory more. So you can buy, you know, you're more likely to be able to buy less quantity on something that you just want to try out if you were also buying bigger volume on something you're more confident with. So I do think that those relationship parts are really important, both from the merchandise side and the supply side.
Got a bit of a fan in chat box here, Iona. Sajal saying, agree, a merchant buying relationship is vital. Love my buyer, he said. Vaibhav, you wanted to come in? Do you want to?
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly, the other important part of it, we talked about the pre-season planning part, where you plan it right, and even the supply chain and the buy part. But the in-season execution, which the planners and the merchandisers do on a day-to-day basis, the operations, right from launching the merchandise from your distribution centers to the stores, and then once it is launched, then making sure that they're replenished on time, at the proper location where the demand or the probability of selling that inventory is higher, doing that right prioritization, and then maybe during middle of the season, taking those actions of maybe doing an inter-store transfer, inventory consolidation to reshuffle the inventory at the right places, pulling it out from where it is not moving and sending it to places where it is actually getting sold out. So all those in-season executions also play a very vital role in, you know, giving you an overall increase in the full price sales by keeping the right inventory at the right place as well.
So replenishment, you're talking about replenishment a little bit here.
So replenishment, inter-store transfers, even the first allocation, when you're launching a style for the first time, the decision of taking to which stores, which set of stores this particular style should be going to is also very crucial.
And has the whole replenishment thing changed, the whole allocation and replenishment thing changed over the last few years at all? I mean, this is to anybody, or is it, you know, is that sort of part of the role just the same, or was there any innovations in that sort of thing?
It has been. It has changed a lot. If I talk about the very traditional way of working, then usually people used to have this grading of stores, grading of point of sale. Okay, this is my top store, this is my medium performing store, bottom performing store. So they would grade A, B, C, different stores, and then prioritize them accordingly. So they'll give full, say they'll be biased completely towards their top revenue stores and prioritize all the styles over there. So from there, now it has been, I mean, there has been realization coming in that the same style may not be good across all the stores. So there can be a style which can be performing very good in a bottom performer store, but not performing at all in, say, a top store. So earlier, it used to be a very big problem handling so many point of sales, so many data points to analyze on spreadsheets and, you know, taking those calls, and that too frequently, very frequently. These replenishment decisions you have to take daily, if not weekly. So now that a lot of tools, a lot of automation, a lot of technology has come in. So yeah, there is more accuracy in this entire decision-making process, because the entire in-season execution is something which can actually work on the actual data, on the real data, what sales is actually going on as of now. So there is where you can make the maximum impact of technology.
Okay, well, that leads me perfectly on to my next discussion point, thank you, which is about technology. Just a couple of things I want to say. First, though, I don't know if you guys are keeping an eye on the chat box. There's some really interesting comments going in there, and I'd love to read them all out, but I just don't have the time to do that. I'm going to see if there's a way of, I think there is a way of downloading these comments, and if we can, we'll try and publish them somewhere so that everybody in this who's taken part in this webinar can have a read at a later date. But Mia, if you're still there, we're about to publish our second poll, actually, which is about technology. So the poll that should be going up any moment is, are you looking to invest in new tech in the next 12 months to better manage your inventory? So just let us know. Yeah, no, maybe, yes. And while that's happening, I'm going to come back to I'm going to come to you, Kanika, and as well, just to talk about sort of, I know obviously this is part of what you guys do, but what other sort of technologies are out there on the market to improve this whole thing? And maybe you can obviously give yourselves a little plug here as well. And tell us how is technology changing things? Obviously, Vaibhav has just told you you can actually analyze things much deeper at store level. So do you want to just give us a little bit about how technology is changing things?
Absolutely, Dale. So technology has actually changed a lot of things in the past. It, of course, has made the job of a buyer as well as a merchandiser much easier. They can focus on what is it that is their expertise rather than having to spend a lot of time on the number crunching, etc. I'll give you an example to what is it that the technology is able to do now that merchandisers and buyers have not been able to do on their own in the past. Let's say traditionally people have been buying as well as sending to stores in size sets, in packs. And people have been saying that, okay, everything is in 1:2:1 kind of a ratio and everything goes in that kind of a ratio, etc. But all said and done, we know for a fact that customers don't really come in a ratio of 1:2:1. So why is it that we're actually sending stuff and buying stuff in that ratio at all times? So what happens is now when you have technology in place, even if you have 1,000 stores to plan for, you have 10,000 SKUs to plan for, you can actually plan and say that, what if I'm able to buy separately without having to follow a certain size set ratio? And what if I'm able to send similar size sets that is suitable to a certain store, depending on what is the buyer profile of that store individually, depending on the drops that we have. So you can actually send on pieces level, not necessarily at a size set level, which has been traditionally the case, both for pre-season as well as in-season planning. And that's not something that you were able to do in the past, but that's something that technology can help you do. That's just one of the examples. The other example, I think, is probably on markdown optimization. Traditionally, if you were able to put up a sticker of 40% off on a merchandise, that's going to lie there for the rest of the season. You're probably not going to be able to change it unless there's going to be even deeper markdown and you change it at some point in time, and that's again going to lie there for the rest of the time. But what if you were able to change that on the go? What if you were able to say that, okay, yesterday this was at 40%, but today I have only one piece left. I don't need to sell this at 40%. I can sell this at just a 10% markdown, or even at full price for that matter, and make that decision on the go really quickly and actually have that up in the stores or on the channels running and have people buy at a higher price for that matter. What if you were able to do all of those things? That's the power of technology these days, Dave.
Fantastic. Well, we've just got getting a bit of an echo here. We've got the results of our poll. So 44% of you are saying that they are maybe considering investing in technology, but not a huge investment. 36% of the audience are saying we need to invest in this area heavily, and then 20% saying no. I'm not sure what that tells us. Actually, would anyone like to comment on that?
It says people are on the fence.
They're on the fence. Okie dokie. Well, I will move on to my next discussion point then in that case. And obviously certain parts of the world now are obviously entering recession. And I just want to know what your thoughts are from a costing point of view, like costing strategies, if you like. Talk to us a little bit about costing strategies in a recession. Where do you start? How do things change? Can I come to you, Iona, on that? Something you did reference it a little bit before, but if you could just elaborate a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I think that's I talked about supplier relationships before, and I think that's really key to have suppliers that you're familiar with and that you have relationships with, and I do think that enables you to negotiate costs better if you're looking at volume with suppliers where you can, instead of spreading your business thinly. I think those supplier decisions and sourcing decisions are really key in the costing. I think also talking about sourcing, I mean, it's about what's right for the product. Each product and each area and category is very different. So if you're buying small volume, you might want to buy from a UK source in order to minimize all the cost in terms of, if you own packaging can cost, the shipment can cost. So I think you've got to look at each category in its own right, and then decide what is best for you. So for example, if you had a category where you buy low volume, you're not really important to that factory, so they're not giving you the best costs. It's difficult to manage for everybody around you. It's difficult to ship. It's expensive to get it to the port. You're not doing big volume. It's not full containers. I think you've got to make decisions based on that, and that will help with your costs. I know there's a lot of people putting prices up, in order to get that upfront margin, like I said, but I think I'm not sure that's necessarily the right thing to do. I know there's an expectation for a small cost rise, but a small retail rise, sorry. But I do think that people should be really careful around that. And I think where you're looking at, it's about being smart as well. So if you're looking at a range and you've got something that, a certain category, a certain fabric, a certain material that you can get good margins on, good costs that the customer likes, that they'll still buy into, then you can balance your cost by weighing in a little bit more that side and stripping out things that maybe you can afford to strip out of if the costs are too high, or it's becoming more complicated. So I think it is just about being smart and balancing it whilst thinking of the customer as well.
And there's a question. Sorry, go on.
A question for you, Iona. So, like you said, it depends a lot on the size of the buys, your relationship with the buyers, etc., especially on the sourcing side. And as we see that the trends are that the buying cycles are getting shorter, people are trying to do buys faster, especially in fast fashion, right? People are not sure of the trends that are going to pan through the season and all. Therefore, you want to buy in smaller quantities and probably place a repeat order later. Do you think that's something that's going to go down well with the suppliers who have to do the whole supply chain of making sure that they actually manufacture in bulk and then they ship in bulk, etc.? How do you think that's going to pan out, Iona, just to follow up to what he said?
Well, I think that's where I touched on supplier relationships. I think is really important, because you have to understand each supplier, each product is different. And I think you have to understand things like the supplier lead times, what suppliers, how the suppliers can buy smarter, how the suppliers can manufacture smarter. And I think that's key to having that relationship and having that conversation and that understanding, rather than saying that's what I want. It's about saying, how can we get those costs down? What can we do together? So how can you get your costs down, and then how can we help to do that? And I think sometimes, listen, I said before, I've come from a teaching background, and I think sometimes people that are inherently buying can take a real hard line about it and think that's the right stance, but I don't think that's the right stance. I think there's a time for hard line, yes, but I think inherently we have to build those relationships and have those discussions and be seen to being flexible as buyers where we can and where it suits us, and then we will get flexibility back. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy and it doesn't work all the time, but
there's a comment in the chat here saying today it's almost impossible. It's from Tiffany's. Today it's almost impossible to negotiate even with bigger volumes due to the increased raw material. And then there's a question from Clement, and I just wanted to bring this out because I'm not actually sure of this term myself. Is dynamic discounting online and in retail not firmly regulated and forbidden? Now, I don't actually know what dynamic discounting is. Can somebody educate me a little bit on that, if you know?
So let me take that. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So dynamic discounting means not just putting a certain discount or certain markdown on a product and leave it be. So it is more the practice of monitoring the performance on an ongoing basis of every product and increasing the markdowns or reducing the markdowns as and when the performance changes. So in a dynamic way, reacting to that.
And is it regulated? Do you know? Does anybody know? And I imagine.
So Dale, let me take that one. So it's regulated in some markets. I think the person asking could be from a market where it is regulated, but not everywhere. It's again, it can be done in multiple ways. You need not necessarily have a different markdown across same products, across stores, channels, etc. You could change it on an ongoing basis. You could change it across channels, across products frequently, which is not really something which is regulated. It's not something which is forbidden to use the same language.
Right, okay.
However, that's something that most customers and even retailers would welcome most likely, because they would want to have lesser inventory that is stuck in their stores. Even customers would want to see freshness on the stores. They don't want to see the same old inventory that's just keep getting deeper and deeper discounts and nothing else.
Yeah,
so it's in the interest of literally everyone out there. So to answer the question, no, it's not really forbidden anywhere, and yes, it's regulated in some markets.
Okay, thank you. Aniket's just made a request again to everybody who's taking part. If you could put the comments so that everybody could read it, not just us on the panel and host, that'd be useful. We're going into our last quarter now, and I think, Mia, if you're still there, we've got one more poll that I wanted to put up. The question should be, how are you currently managing your inventory planning and allocation? Now, do you use Excel models? Do you do things manually? I know it's bonkers. We use intelligent software solutions. I'll let you know in the chat box, or some other sort of solution you can. So guys, if you can fill that in, Mia will publish that when we get a decent section of responses. And while that's happening, I'll just move on to my next question. I want to just talk.
I'm very curious to know the answer to this one, though, Dale. It's going to be very exciting. Well, I know the answer, I think, but I'm very curious to know. What
do you think the answer will be then? Let's have a guess.
I think most people are on Excel model. I don't know if Iona or Vaibhav agree or not. That's where most
Iona?
of the planning and allocation happening.
Listen, I'm a buyer, so I don't do that. But I know we do a lot on Excel, so I'm assuming I don't get involved in allocations and that level of detail. But we are very Excel heavy, yeah.
What about you?
I'm surprised we did not put that as an option of store managers calling and asking for inventory.
I remember getting shouted at once by the warehouse manager when I worked with a clothing brand for getting something like that way, not just phoning up and getting it shipped without even ticking it off the inventory. Remember, it's the only time I've ever been shouted at, swore at, I think. Here we go. I think there we go. Yeah. There's a prize for that. Should be a prize for that.
No surprises.
Champagne, Kanika.
But secondly,
I'm curious about the 5 people who voted and said that we do things manually. Is that what Vaibhav said, right? Are people actually picking up the phone and saying, okay, send me this, send me that, and people are actually saying, oh, this is coming your way, display it and so while, etc. Is that what manual means?
Well, yeah, well, we can ask. If it's for those of you who've clicked on manual, if you don't mind just popping it in the chat box, what it is you actually do, that would be useful for us to see. And if it's not too long, I'll read it out. So yeah, we'll hopefully get some insights about that.
So Ripple, to answer your question, meanwhile, 79% people voted Excel model.
There we go. Excel, but working on AI with Raise, I think. That's someone's just left that comment. How many people voted Excel? So we got, was it 56, wasn't it? Sorry, 44 people in answer to Rimple, in answer to your question. 44 people have voted Excel models out of 110 people. Somebody uses Tweave. Is that ringing any bells, don't know? Okay.
Not to me.
Not to you, but to somebody. Okay, cool. So we're coming to the last 10 minutes anyway. So I wanted to bring up the someone else has put a comment here. Excel and a mix of, what's that? D365?
Microsoft. That I'm familiar with.
And 7th Online. Okay, it's really quite interesting, this. I might actually, if you like, I might actually do a poll on our feed and then I edit poll to get a bit more of a wider cross section.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I've got to bring up the S word. And that is sustainability, because every time we do one of these sessions, somebody asks a question about sustainability. I'm surprised no one has today as yet. But what's the impact of sustainability having on both of these roles? I'm going to come to you, Iona, on this. How is it affecting things? Is it affecting your buying decisions? Is it affecting your strategy? What's your thoughts on this?
It's a tough one, sustainability, because yes, it's impacting us in lots of different ways. Obviously, you know, we do a lot under the radar, Matalan, actually, from a sustainability perspective. I don't think we shout about it, but we've been on it for a number of years. We were on it well before it was trendy, really. So we've always been, it's always been really important to us to, you know, work with the local areas that we produce in, you know, and make sure that the fabrics are well produced and, you know, it's not impacting the environment as much. And I think that there are a couple of points. First of all, I think because of the cost of living, sustainability has gone a little bit out of the window from the customer mindset perspective. So, you know, I think while it's still there and probably more, well, actually I say in the younger generation, my 12-year-old daughter, though, I was talking to her the other day and she said, oh, they're not bothered about that. So aren't your generation meant to be really bothered? No. So I think probably we think more people are bothered than they really are. And actually in reality, people want value and cost, you know, they want to pay the right price for the right product mostly, and sustainability is probably second to that. So I think we just have to be careful that it's important and it's important to the environment, but we just have to balance that with the customer expectation. But I think, you know, the way I see it mostly, and I'm in homeware, so the way we see it a lot is we obviously have tried to reduce packing, but then we're looking at e-com heavy, and that's a very different, that is more packing heavy. So we're having that discussion at the moment, that balance of, well, hold on a minute, we're trying to make it use less packaging, make it more sustainable, with balancing that with it reaching the customer in a decent state. So I think that there's lots of conversations and lots of disjoin where sustainability is, you know, we talk about costs, but then we're adding costs by making it more sustainable. So I think there's a lot of headbutting and disjoin, I think, where sustainability sits. We're all on board with doing it, but it's how we go about it, really.
Well, Jeff has put in the chat box, apparel is one of the most resource heavy industries. Better optimization of inventory and less excess can make a huge difference. So I think it's probably, you can get away with it there, Iona, not being in apparel. I will say that one of your speakers, actually, Matalan, were one of the first persons to put forward a head of sustainability speaker at one of our events many years ago, and that's probably the best part of almost 10 years ago. So you were ahead of the curve there.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
There was another comment here that oh yes, from this is from Kanika. We have noticed that even multi-million-dollar revenue companies still use Excel for inventory and planning. It doesn't surprise me at all, actually. On this, continue with the sustainability thing. Do either one of you want to sort of mention something about it, Vaibhav or Kanika? Do you want to?
Absolutely, Dale. So, like Iona mentioned, I think sustainability has multiple facets to it. It's not just one way to look at it. Of course, it has a massive impact on the environment. Having said that, how do you make sure that you minimize the impact on the environment? How do you make sure that you are doing the right thing by everyone? Like Jeff mentioned there, right? If you're planning better, if you're merchandising better, you don't really have to make as much inventory as that is required to serve the same number of people. You might be able to actually have far lesser inventory left over than you would if you did not really plan better. So I think it all starts with planning and buying better. If you're able to do buying and planning at the right levels, and then you're able to course correct in time enough to not have any excess left over, that's going to make a huge impact in the first place. And whatever is actually there in the stores, it's already been bought, that needs to be sold rather than having to take care of it in some or the other way later. It's best, it's in everybody's interest if it gets sold. So I would say planning and buying better is the key to solving this problem as far as the apparel and fashion industry is concerned.
Vaibhav, do you want anything to add?
Yeah, I cannot emphasize more on this point. I think we all are aware that we as an industry are the ones generating the most wastage in terms of what we buy versus what we sell. So more than half our inventory, what we buy for selling, goes unsold in most cases. So definitely we have a huge opportunity to give our bit to improve or add on to this part. So not only by planning better, going smart on in terms of the entire supply chain, or where you're betting, how much you're betting, at what time, for what place you're betting, but also making strategies about reusing whatever has been wasted or whatever has gone unsold. So both the ends of the spectrum, I believe, are going to play an important role on this front.
Fantastic.
Isn't it? I was just going to say, isn't it a difficult thing as a buyer? You know, you want people to buy more, and yet on a personal level, you don't want people to buy more because it's not great for the environment. So it's a difficult one, that.
Well, watch this space. We do have a sustainability session coming up later this year. In fact, it might be a half-day mini conference actually. So for those of you registered with the network, keep an eye on that, because it's an interesting topic, and it's, like you say, it's multifaceted, and there's lots of different strains to the whole thing about sustainability. Chiefly among it, what is sustainability actually? I've got one more question to add, but I just want to remind everybody that we're having a post-event debrief after this for about 10 to 15 minutes. My colleague Mia will be sharing the link in the chat box for that if you want to come and join us for that. There you go. But also I just want to say thank you again to not only our speakers but our sponsors, and just to remind you that Increff, who have sponsored today's session, are a software business that helps brands and retailers to better optimize their inventory management. Like I said, it's the merchandiser's best friend. The Increff solution can help you allocate better and help you to fulfill orders across all sales channels through one common omni-channel platform. So that's Increff, and there's the link in the chat box. Come and join us afterwards if you can. No problem, Tiffany, if you can't join us. We'll only be there for 10 to 15 minutes. But my last question is just about future proofing. So what would you guys do to sort of like future proof your businesses against sort of like changing trends within sort of the whole buying and merchandising thing? I might come to you, Vaibhav, first, if that's okay.
So I think keeping an eye on the trend is very important. COVID has been a very big lesson for us. So during that period, a lot of trend changed, or the demand changed at a category level, that you were selling more of boxers or shorts or something which you wear at home than formal pants and trousers, things like that. So similarly, recently with the recession, that point I wanted to add that the trend has now moved towards more value added products. So more of lower average selling price products are selling rather than say the high price point products. So then keeping an eye on this price points, etc. So I think it is important to make use of your historical learning and keep an eye on the current trend also. So you would have as a brand your say guardrails that you cannot go below this price point, or you would not place a product above this price point, but on which area to bet heavily on, or which side to increase your contribution in terms of buys, etc. I think are going to be very important in the coming years.
Okay, Kanika, can I come to you and give us your
Absolutely.
thoughts on
adding on to what Vaibhav said there, Dale, I think agility is going to be the key in future proofing, because honestly, while trends are going to be important at all times to come, there's no way anybody's going to be able to accurately predict the trends. The only way is going to be agility. How do you bring in more agility into your business and to be able to make decisions fast and on the go? So if you've made any mistakes in the past in your buys, in your allocation, etc., how do you correct them really quickly? How do you make sure that you not just spot those trends, you also correct them really quickly? And that's gonna make sure that you don't really you're not stuck with anything. You have everything going like you said, future-proofing the business.
Cool. And Iona, you can have the last word. Talk us
Thanks.
through about what
I always
you
like
do.
to have the last word. My family will tell you. I think I'll just give a buy-in answer to this, a bit less technical, but I think for me, it's just about it's going to be a difficult year, and it's going to be, for me, future-proofing is about understanding that customer and not knee-jerk sort of, doing strategies that are knee-jerk to the time. I think it's about, I said, about being bullish but stay calm at the same time. And I think, so you don't get unstuck, because I think some people might do if they start to panic and knee-jerk react to the changes that are going to happen this year.
Fantastic. Well, a huge thank you, guys, and a huge thank you. We've had over about 130 odd people in this session today for everybody that's contributed. I hope you've all found it informative. we're going to be meeting in a sort of standard Zoom meeting for about 10 to 15 minutes. If anyone wants to come and join us, you're more than welcome. If we have a few of us, we'll probably just split out into quick one-to-one sessions. So you might meet somebody. You might meet somebody within this webinar. You might have a chance to have a chat with one of us. Who knows? It's a little bit random, I have to say. It's not like a real world environment. So hopefully we'll see you guys there. I'm just going to share the link in the chat box again. There should be a link also in the registration email that you got from us. So thank you all for joining, and hopefully see you three briefly after this as well. So thanks very much, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone.
See you shortly.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.